Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be going over the Stony Plain FCSS Youth Center Summer Concession Policies 2019. I am your instructor, Terrence. So basically a lot of this course is going to be me teaching you and informing you of these policies so that you can reiterate them to these youth. They're very important because they go over the important safety procedures and just overall how to operate these machines so that youth are doing it in a safe way and not having any problems. So literally the first step in your training process is going to be going over these policies with the youth. So it is my job to inform you of them so that you know them well enough to go over them with the youth. So a little info on me. Again, I am Terrence. I have been an employee at the youth center for a year now. I started out last year just working these concessions with the youth. This year we decided to make it a more fulfilling experience for the youth by turning it more into a business related experience. So this is not only just having the youth work in the concessions and serve the food that they are there to serve, but also that they are going to be taking after the books. We're going to be charging them hours, doing all that kind of stuff. So first we're going to be talking about the contents of the presentation. First we're going to be talking about food vendor responsibilities. Then we're going to be talking about the policies for the equipment and how to operate them properly and safely. Then we're going to be talking about the first aid policy, the weather and heat policy, and then we're going to be talking about the hazards associated with the job. This is all gone over in the Stony Plain FCSS Youth Center Policy Handbook, so everyone will have one of these and everyone will be going over them. The youth will also have one of these in their concession bins, so it's not like they'll just see it once and it'll go away. They will have it available, but they need to remember it. And now we are going to begin with the food vendor responsibilities. You can follow along in your handbook if you need. So, food vendor responsibilities. These are things like food source and preparation. So the booth should be set up and ready for inspection at least 1 hour prior to the event. This allows us to get everything clean, everything organized, and we make sure we have everything that we need. Food must be obtained from an approved source. So we can't just get food off the street like normal. We have requirements because if someone was to get sick, that falls back onto us. So we can't do that. We have to get approved food. And for us, it is pre-cooked food. We're not allowed to serve raw food. So again, just another thing to go over. Food protection. Foods must be protected from contamination and transported appropriately. We follow all those procedures. Everything's cold, everything's the proper temperature it needs to be, all that. Cooking devices and equipment must be separated from the public. When we set up our concessions, we actually have a line of tables so that the public cannot get easy access to our preparation, and they are on the other side of the table. Foods must be kept in their correct storage and hauling temperature. Again, yes, we keep it all at the temperature, and we have coolers and stuff to make sure it stays that temperature when we are out at the concessions. Food must be handled in a safe manner. Obviously, we don't want to keep it contaminated, and we always wear gloves when working with it. Incapable activities such as using phones, fooling around, petting animals, and other sources of contamination will not be allowed. Clearly, we are a food serving company, not a company, but a facility, so we cannot do that. It goes against the safe food handling policy. Next, food handler hygiene. Everyone must wash their hands as necessary. You cannot handle money and food at the same time. You must wash your hands when switching tasks. Because this again goes with contamination, we have to wear gloves, we can't have people dealing with food and money. So we have a designated person dealing with money because that's all they touch, and then there's people that deal with the food. So there's delegating of tasks. Wearing gloves is not a substitute to washing hands. Gloves are not to be reused and need to be changed when they become contaminated. Gloves must be worn if food handler has cuts or wounds on hands. Again, just proper food handling. Gloves, if you have cut, let someone know. Let your supervisor know. Hair must be controlled and secured. Food handlers must not work when ill. If you're sick, let us know. You can't work, so we deal with it. Clothing must be worn clean clothing must be worn at all times. Again, we are food vendors. We have responsibilities to uphold. We can't have dirty clothing with pet hair on it, for example, when we're serving food, because we're going to get pet hair in someone's food. That's not okay. Again, refrain from incapable activities such as using your phone, petting animals, that kind of stuff. Next, we're going to talk about water supply. So we're only going to use safe water. Again, we will have water provided from the town, which is always safe. Make sure water containers are clean and sanitized. That happens every night after the concession. Water must come from an approved location supply. Again, that's going to be coming from the youth center, so it's not contaminated water, it's just the town of Stony Plain water. Cleanliness and maintenance. Keep the workshop clean and sanitized throughout the shift. Again, you can't have anything happen on the shift, and if it's messy, you clean it up. That's fact. Sink requirements. There will be a hand washing station somewhere in the concession. There will have to be a sink set up just so that everyone can wash their hands. It has to happen. Dishes will be washed when returning to the Stony Plain Youth Center. So we will not actually have a sink for washing dishes because it's just not capable in our concessions that travel around like they do. So that will happen when it gets returned to the youth center at the end of the night. Approved sanitizers. So only use appropriate sanitizers when cleaning, and those will be, only the appropriate ones will be provided at the youth center in order to do the cleaning. Next, we're going to talk about the policy for the equipment. The purpose of this policy is to outline the procedure we must take if using or operating the equipment, just to make sure everyone is doing it safely. So first we're going to talk about the barbecue. So the procedure for operating the barbecue is, it is the responsibility of the on-duty supervisor to have a first aid kit stocked and available at each concession. It is also the responsibility of the on-duty supervisor to ensure he or she or someone else supervising has completed a valid first aid course and has a valid certificate. Youth operating the barbecue must be shown a demonstration on how to use it, how to safely operate it. So one of your tasks later in your training with these youth is to actually go through and do a proper training session on how to operate the barbecue, how to properly turn it on, how to clean it, how to shut it off and make sure it's all good. The youth are not responsible for hooking up and disconnecting the propane. That is the job of the on-duty supervisor. Right there. It is the responsibility of the on-duty supervisor to connect the propane tank to and from the barbecue. All youth and admin must use pot holders when handling hot cookware. Again, we can't have cuts and burns because that goes against safe food handling procedures. So follow that. If a burn occurs as a result of using the barbecue, you must notify the on-duty supervisor immediately. Do not touch the burn to avoid infection. Immediately treat the burn with cold water. Do not use ice packs, or other objects, just because it can cause infection, and that's not what we want. Okay, next we're going to be talking about the popcorn machine. So the procedure to safely use the popcorn machine will be all youth operating the popcorn machine must be supervised by a trained youth center staff or volunteer. A demonstration of how to properly use this appliance is necessary before the youth can use it independently. again, this is another task that you will be training the youth on in your following training sessions. This machine requires 2 people to operate. It does get hot and it is difficult to do, so that's why we require 2 youth to do it. If they have questions about it, just tell them that. Hands must be clean and dry before using these appliances. And you must wear gloves when necessary. Next, we are going to be talking about the hot dog machine. So this is not always used at our concessions. Sometimes we just use the barbecue, but sometimes we do use the hot dog machine. It depends on how busy we expect to be and how close to other facilities we expect to be, because if we're close to a building, we will use this instead, but if we're out somewhere and we don't have access to power, we're going to use the barbecue instead. But our procedure for using the hot dog machine is all youth operating the hot dog machine must be supervised by a trained youth center staff or volunteer. A demonstration of how to properly use this appliance is necessary before the youth can use it independently. Hands must be clean and dry before the use of appliances. Do not wear gloves because they will melt. It is a hot appliance, so don't use gloves. Next, we're going to be talking about the cotton candy machine. So, a little about the cotton candy machine. We will not be using this at events. This will be something that is done the night before, just because it requires a lot of extra work. So we don't normally do them at the concession. This is done the night before. So the procedure for how to safely use the cotton candy machine is all youth operating this machine must be supervised by a trained youth center staff or volunteer. A demonstration on how to use this appliance is necessary before the youth can use it independently, and they will not be using it independently. Someone will always be with them. This machine requires 2 people wearing safety glasses to operate. Hands must be clean and dry before the use of appliances, and wear gloves when necessary. Now we're going to be talking about the second policy for first aid. This policy outlines the procedure we must take if one becomes injured, burned, cut, or hurt. So our first aid procedure is: it is the responsibility of the on-duty supervisor to have a first aid kit stocked and available at each concession. It is also the responsibility of the on-duty supervisor to ensure he or she or someone else supervising has completed a valid first aid course and has a valid certificate. Youth operating equipment must be shown a demonstration on how to safely use it. If an injury occurs, you must notify the on-duty supervisor immediately. Do not touch the area to avoid infection occurring. Next, we're going to be talking about policy number 3. This is for weather and heat. The purpose of this policy is to outline the necessary procedures that must be taken when youth are exposed to extreme heat from the sun. Workers may suffer heat-related illnesses such as sunburns, heat rash, heat cramps, heat stroke, exhaustion, etc. Severe conditions include places with high humidity, places where air movement is limited, or when working in the direct sun. So we normally have a tent up, but sometimes we don't have the luxury of having the tent up to block us from the sun, so sometimes we are exposed to it. It happens. So the procedure to safely operate in weather and heat. Workers must stay hydrated, drinking small amounts of cool water frequently. Replace salt and minerals that may be lost when you sweat by drinking a sports beverage or eating an occasional snack. Wear appropriate clothing, so this is lightweight, light-colored, loose-fitting clothing. Just take time to cool down, rest often in shady areas. A few hours in air conditioning can help you stay cooler later in the heat. Protect yourself from the sun by wearing a wide-brimmed hat and sunscreen. If a heat-related illness occurs, get medical help and report it to your supervisor immediately. Move the person to a cooler area where they can rest. Take off excess clothing. Give the person water to drink, only if they are able to drink it on their own. Cool the person with a cold compress and rapid fanning. Next, we're going to be talking about the hazards associated with this job. So, number one, electric shock from an appliance and water. So, we at the youth center don't often have power access with our concessions because we run them outside. So it's not very easy for us to have this, but it does happen when we were at the youth center, perhaps preparing for a concession. So this outlines the procedures that must be taken if an electric shock occurs from the use of an electric appliance. So the procedure to safely operate is follow the defective equipment procedure when appliances are identified as defective. Be cautious of safe placement of electrical appliances away from water sources. Caution is to be taken when working with appliances. Always be sure to have dry hands when working with electrical appliances. Number two, we're going to be talking about carrying and lifting heavy items. This outlines the procedure that must be taken when lifting heavy objects. The safety procedure for that is we have a dolly or trolley available at the town office or the youth center for use when needed. Admin or youth, the supervisor or the youth, must request assistance from another worker when necessary. The supervisors or staff may refer to the manual lifting safety policy procedure. So this is where the training staff, you, will be going over how to safely lift this. And so again, this, to go over that with you, is to not lift with your back. You're supposed to lift with your knees. So you bend down, stand up. Third, we're going to be talking about slips, trips, and falls. This is to outline procedures we must take in order to reduce the chances of injury as the result of a slip, trip, or fall. We just want to eliminate that possibility altogether. The procedure for that is workers must refer to the housekeeping safety guide. So the staff on site will be going over that and trying to reduce the possibilities for these by moving the hazards or identifying the hazards and letting everyone know so that does not happen. Ensure there are no safety hazards in the workplace that could cause one to trip or fall. If a spill of any kind occurs in the workplace, please clean it up immediately. Please use a wet floor signage at all times necessary. Just reduce the chance of someone having an injury. Number 4, struck by a vehicle carrying items to or from the youth center. So, when we do these concessions, they are often across the street at Shikayo Park. These are our summer sessions, so we have to cross the street in order to get our equipment over to where we need it to be for these concessions. So this is a huge risk because we have kids that need to cross the street and it's a busy street that lots of vehicles go on. So youth need to know that they need to use the crosswalk and to make sure they look both ways. Again, this is to outline the procedures that must be taken in order to prevent the chances of a youth or supervisor being struck by a vehicle while transporting items to or from the Stony Plain Youth Center. So the safety procedure for that is all workers must use a crosswalk. And then again, all workers must look both ways before crossing the street. And that is the end of the presentation. That is the end of all of the safety policies and anything that you may need to go over in the policy book. If you have any questions, now would be the time to answer or ask them, but if not, thank you for coming and I hope it was informative.